The thunderous roar of cattle sent tremors through the earth, threatening to swallow Delia Zimmer's wagon whole as she clung to the reins of her panicked horses, her knuckles white with terror. The setting sun cast long shadows across the California trail, turning the massive cloud of dust kicked up by hundreds of stampeding longhorns into a golden haze of certain death. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The full force of the herd was bearing down on her wooden wagon with unstoppable momentum. Delia's journey west to Colfax, California, had been filled with hardship, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. At 24, she had already endured more than most, losing her parents to influenza back east, selling everything she owned to chase the promise of a new beginning in gold country. Now, in the late summer of 1872, it seemed her journey would end in splinters and hoofbeats on this lonely stretch of trail. The horses screamed, rearing against their harnesses as the ground beneath them quaked. Delia could barely breathe through the rising dust, could scarcely think through her terror. Her supplies rattled around her flour sacks, mining tools, the precious sewing machine she'd brought all the way from Pennsylvania, soon to be trampled beneath 1,000 hooves. Then, through the chaos, a blur of movement caught her eye. A rider on a powerful black stallion galloped alongside the Stampede, cutting in from the side with reckless courage. The cowboy, tall and lean in the saddle, cracked a whip above his head, the sharp report like gunfire as he maneuvered his horse with astonishing skill. The lone figure darted in front of the lead steers, weaving and turning, somehow managing to divert the massive herd just yards from her frozen wagon. Delia watched in disbelief as the Stampede began to turn, the foremost cattle veering away from her under the cowboy's influence. The ground still shook violently as the bulk of the herd thundered past, close enough for her to feel the heat from their bodies, but the wagon remained intact, the deadly collision avoided by mere seconds and inches. As the last of the cattle passed, the dust began to settle, revealing the cowboy now riding toward her. Sunlight glinted off his sweat-drenched face as he pulled up alongside her wagon. His hat was gone, lost to the Stampede, revealing dark hair that fell across his forehead. His blue shirt was torn at the shoulder and dust covered him from head to toe, but his eyes, a startling shade of green, were clear and alert as they met hers. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and hoarse from dust and exertion. "Are you hurt?" Delia realized she was still clutching the reins so tightly her fingers had gone numb. She tried to speak, but her throat constricted, and she could only shake her head. Her entire body was trembling. The man swung down from his horse with fluid grace and approached the wagon. "Name's Zachary Blackstone," he said, reaching up to offer his hand. "Those were Hendrick's cattle. Been trying to keep them in check since yesterday's storm spooked them near the north pasture." Delia finally found her voice, though it emerged as little more than a whisper. "Delia Zimmer. I don't know how to thank you." He helped her down from the wagon, his strong hands steady as her boots touched the ground. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, and he caught her by the elbow. "Easy there," he said. His face was weathered, tanned from long days in the sun, but his features were handsome, strong jaw, straight nose, those remarkable eyes that seemed to see right through her. "First Stampede." Despite everything, Delia found herself laughing, a shaky sound edged with hysteria. "First and hopefully last." Zachary smiled, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Where you headed, Miss Zimmer?" "Colfax," she replied, brushing dust from her skirts with unsteady hands. "I have an uncle there. He's offered me a place to stay while I establish myself." "Colfax," he repeated, nodding. "I know it well. My ranch is about 15 miles south. Small place, but it's home." He glanced at her wagon, assessing the condition. One wheel looked slightly askew, and her horses were still snorting and stamping nervously. "Your wagon took a beating. Not sure it'll make it all the way to Colfax without repairs." Delia felt her heart sink. She had so little money left, certainly not enough for extensive repairs. "How bad is it?" "Nothing that can't be fixed," he said, crouching to examine the wheel more closely. "But you'd be risking a breakdown if you pushed on. There's a small settlement about 3 miles ahead Riverton. I can escort you there, help you get situated for the night. There's a decent wheelwright who can look at this come morning." Delia hesitated, weighing her options. She was a woman alone on the frontier, and she had been raised to be cautious about accepting help from strange men. But this man had just saved her life at great risk to his own, and night was approaching. The prospect of camping alone with a damaged wagon seemed far more dangerous than accepting his escort. "I would be grateful for your assistance, Mr. Blackstone," she said finally. "Zach," he corrected, already moving to check on her horses. "No need for formalities out here." As he calmed her team with gentle hands and soft words, Delia watched him, still trying to process what had happened. Minutes ago, she had been certain she was facing death. Now she was alive, her possessions intact, being helped by this stranger who had appeared like some avenging angel out of the dust. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "You could have been killed turning that herd." Zachary looked up from the horses, his expression serious. "Couldn't just ride by and watch it happen, could I?" He said it simply, as if risking his life for a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. With the horses settled, Zachary retrieved his own mount and tied it to the back of her wagon. "I'll drive," he offered, climbing up to the bench. "You've had enough excitement for one day." Delia nodded gratefully and took her place beside him, acutely aware of his presence, the breadth of his shoulders, the capable hands that now held her reins, the faint scent of leather and horses that surrounded him. As they set off toward Riverton with the sun sinking toward the horizon, she found herself stealing glances at his profile, wondering what twist of fate had put him in the right place at the right time to save her. What she didn't know then was that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The small settlement of Riverton appeared as the last light faded from the sky, a scattering of buildings huddled along a dirt main street, windows glowing with lamplight. Compared to the bustling eastern cities Delia had known, it was hardly more than an outpost. But after the terrifying events of the afternoon, the sight of civilization was deeply comforting. Zachary guided the wagon to a modest building with a sign proclaiming it Miller's Boarding House. Before he could help her down, the door swung open, and a stout woman with iron-gray hair stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Zach Blackstone, is that you making a racket at this hour?" she called, then stopped short when she spotted Delia. "And with company, no less." "Evening, Mrs. Miller," Zachary replied, touching the brim of his hat. He'd recovered it from his saddlebag during their journey. "This is Miss Delia Zimmer. She had a close call with Hendrick's cattle out on the trail. Her wagon needs repairs before she can continue to Colfax." Mrs. Miller's expression softened immediately. "You poor dear, come in, come in. I've just finished supper and there's plenty to spare." She bustled forward, taking Delia's arm as she stepped down from the wagon. "Stampede, was it? Terrible business." Those Hendricks boys never could control their herd properly. Delia allowed herself to be led inside, grateful for the woman's motherly concern. The boarding house was plain but clean, with a large common room warmed by a crackling fire. The smell of stew and fresh bread made her suddenly aware of how hungry she was. "Mr. Blackstone saved my life," Delia said, glancing back to where Zachary was following them in. "The herd was heading straight for my wagon. He turned them away just in time." Mrs. Miller clucked her tongue. That sounds like our Zach, always playing the hero. There was fondness in her tone as she directed them to a table near the fire. Sit, both of you, I'll fetch bowls. As they settled at the table, Delia became conscious of her appearance. Her dress was filthy with dust. Her hair had come loose from its pins, and she must look a fright. But Zachary didn't seem to notice or care. He sat across from her, his posture relaxed but alert, those green eyes studying her with interest. "Have you come far?" he asked. "Pennsylvania," she replied. "My parents died last winter and there was nothing left for me there." She hadn't intended to reveal so much, but something about his direct gaze made her want to be honest. "That's a long journey for a woman alone. I traveled with a family from Philadelphia to St. Louis and then joined a wagon train to Sacramento," she explained. "We parted ways there, and I've been making my way north ever since. My uncle has a dry goods store in Colfax. He's offered me work and a place to stay." Mrs. Miller returned with bowls of steaming stew and a plate of cornbread, interrupting their conversation. "Eat up while it's hot," she instructed. "Zach, you'll see to Miss Zimmer's wagon tomorrow." "Already planning on it," he confirmed. "I'll take it to Johnson's smithy at first light." "Good man." Mrs. Miller nodded approvingly. "Miss Zimmer, I have a room available upstairs. It's simple but clean with a proper bed and washstand." "That sounds wonderful," Delia said gratefully. "What do I owe you?" "2 bits for the night and another 2 for meals," Mrs. Miller replied. "Best deal in Riverton, I assure you." Delia reached for her reticule, relief washing over her. Even with the wagon repairs, she could manage this expense. As Mrs. Miller bustled away to tend to other guests, Delia turned her attention to the food. The stew was hearty and flavorful, reminding her she hadn't eaten since morning. She and Zachary ate in companionable silence for a few moments before he spoke again. "Your uncle in Colfax, what's his name? I make deliveries there sometimes. Might know him." "Edwin Zimmer," she replied. "Zimmer's General Store on Mill Street." Recognition flickered across Zachary's face. "Sure, I know old Ed. Good man, fair in his dealings." He broke off a piece of cornbread. "He never mentioned family coming west." "We haven't been in touch regularly," Delia admitted. "I wrote to him after my parents passed and he responded with the offer. It was unexpected but welcome." "You'll like Colfax," Zachary said. "It's growing fast with the railroad but still has a good sense of community. Not like some of these boom towns that spring up overnight and disappear just as quick." "And your ranch? You said it's nearby." "Pine Ridge Ranch," he nodded. "It's not much compared to some spreads, just 60 acres and about 100 head of cattle. But the land is good, with year-round water from a creek that runs through the property." Pride colored his voice as he spoke of his home. "You live there alone?" Delia asked, then immediately felt her cheeks warm at the personal nature of the question. If Zachary noticed her embarrassment, he didn't show it. "Just me and my foreman, Tom Wilkes. Had a couple of hands during the spring roundup, but they've moved on. Tom and I manage fine most of the year." Their conversation flowed easily as they finished their meal, moving from talk of ranching and cattle to Delia's journey west and the changes she'd observed in the country. Zachary was intelligent and well-spoken despite his frontier occupation, and Delia found herself enjoying his company more than she'd expected. When they finally pushed their empty bowls aside, Delia stifled a yawn behind her hand. The events of the day were catching up with her, exhaustion settling into her bones. "You should rest," Zachary said, noticing her fatigue. "I'll see to your wagon in the morning, say 8 o'clock. "That would be perfect." "Thank you, Mr. Zach," she corrected herself, offering a small smile. He stood and helped her from her chair. "Good night, Miss Zimmer," Delia, she said softly. If I'm to call you Zach, you must call me Delia. Something warm flickered in his eyes. Good night then, Delia. Sleep well. As she climbed the stairs to her room, guided by Mrs. Miller, Delia found herself thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought Zachary Blackstone into her life. She had no illusions about frontier life. It would be hard, demanding work to establish herself in Colfax, and she had no time for distractions, especially not in the form of handsome ranchers with kind eyes. And yet, as she prepared for bed in the small, comfortable room, she couldn't help but wonder if their paths might cross again once she reached her destination. Colfax wasn't so far from his ranch after all. With that thought warming her heart, Delia slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep, the terror of the stampede finally releasing its hold on her mind. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the small window of Delia's room. For a moment, she lay still, orienting herself to her surroundings before the events of the previous day came rushing back. The stampede, the cowboy, the damaged wagon, it all seemed like a dream in the gentle morning light. She rose quickly, eager to begin the day. After washing at the small basin and changing into her second-best dress, a practical blue calico that had survived the journey relatively unscathed, she pinned her auburn hair into a neat bun and made her way downstairs. The common room was busy with other guests having breakfast. Mrs. Miller spotted her immediately and waved her to a table where a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits awaited. "Eat up, dear," the older woman instructed. "Zach's already been by. He's taken your wagon over to Johnson's smithy to get that wheel fixed." Delia felt a twinge of disappointment at having missed him, which she immediately tried to dismiss. "That was thoughtful of him. I hope it won't be too expensive." "Johnson's fair," Mrs. Miller assured her, "and Zach has a way of negotiating good prices. Don't you worry." Delia ate quickly, then asked directions to the smithy. She wanted to see the damage for herself and needed to know how long repairs would take. Colfax was still a day's journey away, and she was anxious to reach her uncle before he began to worry about her delayed arrival. The smithy was easy to find, marked by the rhythmic clanging of metal on metal and a plume of smoke rising from its chimney. As Delia approached, she saw her wagon parked outside, one wheel removed and being examined by a burly man she assumed must be Johnson. Zachary stood beside him, his hat pushed back as they discussed the repairs. He spotted her before she could announce herself, a smile spreading across his face that made her heart skip. In the clear morning light, she could fully appreciate his appearance, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair neatly combed back, his clean-shaven jaw strong and defined. He wore a fresh shirt today, deep blue cotton that complemented his tanned skin, tucked into well-worn denims. "Morning," he called, striding to meet her. "Hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, conscious of a strange, fluttering sensation in her stomach. "How bad is the damage? Could have been worse," Zachary said, leading her to where the wheelwright was working. "The axle's bent, and the wheel itself needs new spokes. Johnson here says he can have it fixed by mid-afternoon." The blacksmith looked up from his work, nodding at Delia. "Afternoon at the latest, madam. Wouldn't take so long, but I've got a couple jobs ahead of yours." "I understand," Delia said. "Thank you for fitting me in. For a friend of Zach's," Johnson grinned, revealing a gap where his front tooth should be. "Happy to help." As they stepped away to let Johnson work, Zachary turned to her. "That gives you a few hours in town. Anything you need to stock up on before heading to Colfax?" Delia considered the state of her supplies. "Some flour, perhaps, and coffee, if I can afford it after paying for the repairs." "The general store's just down the street," Zachary said, gesturing to a false-fronted building a few doors away. "Might I accompany you? I have a few errands of my own." Delia found herself agreeing readily, though she knew it would be perfectly proper to go alone in the small town. There was something about Zachary's company that she was reluctant to give up. The general store was well stocked for such a small settlement, its shelves laden with everything from basic necessities to small luxuries. While Delia selected her modest purchases, Zachary collected supplies of his own ammunition, tobacco for his foreman, a new shirt to replace the one torn during yesterday's excitement. As Delia carefully counted out her coins for the storekeeper, she was intensely aware of Zachary watching her. When the man named a price for her flour and coffee that seemed suspiciously low, she glanced between them with narrowed eyes. "Is that the usual price?" she asked cautiously. The storekeeper shrugged. "Special today." She knew instantly that Zachary had said something to the man, arranged some discount without consulting her. Pride stiffened her spine as they exited the store. "You shouldn't have done that," she said once they were outside, her voice low but firm. Zachary looked genuinely confused. "Done what?" "Arranged a discount. I can pay my own way, Mr. Blackstone." Understanding dawned on his face, followed by a respectful nod. "You're right, and I apologize. It wasn't charity, just a favor between friends, but I should have asked first." His immediate acceptance of her rebuke surprised Delia. Most men she knew would have argued or dismissed her concerns. His respect for her independence eased her irritation. "Thank you for understanding," she said, softening her tone. "I've had to become very self-sufficient since my parents died." "It's an admirable quality," Zachary replied as they began walking back toward the smithy. "Most folks out here learn it sooner or later. The West doesn't suffer dependence gladly." They passed a small restaurant and Zachary paused. "Would you join me for lunch?" "My treat not as charity," he added quickly with a smile, "but as a continuation of our acquaintance. I'd like to know more about the woman I pulled from the path of a stampede." Delia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." The restaurant was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and windows that let in ample light. Over plates of roast beef and potatoes, they continued the conversation that had begun the night before, delving deeper into each other's lives and experiences. Delia learned that Zachary had come west as a young man of 19, working as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his own small property 5 years ago. He'd built it up gradually, living frugally and reinvesting every penny of profit back into the land and livestock. "My father was a tenant farmer back in Virginia," he explained. "Worked someone else's land his whole life, never owned a square foot of it. I swore I'd have something of my own one day." "And now you do," Delia said, impressed by his determination. "You must be proud." "I am," he admitted. "Though there's still much I want to accomplish. The house needs work. It's just a 2-room cabin right now, and I'd like to improve the stock, maybe add some horses for breeding." "You've made a good start," she observed, "especially on your own." A shadow crossed his face. "It wasn't always on my own. I was engaged once, about 3 years back. Sarah was her name. She was the daughter of a rancher near Sacramento." Delia sensed his hesitation. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Fever took her," Zachary said simply. "Winter of '69. We'd planned to marry that spring." "I'm so sorry," Delia said, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. She knew all too well the pain of such loss. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. "Life goes on. The ranch keeps me busy, gives me purpose." After a moment, he shifted the conversation. "What about you? What are your plans once you reach Colfax?" Grateful for the change of subject, Delia explained her arrangements. "Uncle Edwin has offered me a position in his store. I'm good with numbers and organization. skills he apparently needs. And I can sew. I brought my mother's sewing machine, hoping to earn extra by taking in mending and making dresses. Sounds like you've thought it through, Zachary said approvingly. Colfax could use a good seamstress. The ladies there are always complaining about having to send to Sacramento for proper dressmaking. Really? Delia brightened at this news. I was worried there might already be established competition. Not that I've heard. There's Mrs. Weston who does basic alterations, but no one with real dressmaking skills. He studied her thoughtfully. You might do well for yourself there. As they finished their meal, Delia found herself reluctant for their time together to end. There was an ease to their conversation, a natural rapport that she hadn't expected to find with a stranger, particularly not a man she'd met under such dramatic circumstances. They walked back to the smithy together to check on the progress of her wagon. Johnson had removed the damaged wheel entirely and was working on the bent axle, his powerful arms glistening with sweat as he hammered the hot metal. "Coming along," he called when he spotted them. "Another hour, maybe 2. Zachary suggested a walk to pass the time, and Delia agreed readily. He led her down to the small river that gave the settlement its name, a clear, swift-flowing stream lined with cottonwoods and willows. A well-worn path followed its course, and they strolled along it, the gentle sound of rushing water providing a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "Will you return to your ranch tonight?" Delia asked as they paused to watch a heron stalking fish in the shallows. "That's my plan," Zachary replied, "though I thought I might escort you to Colfax first if you'd allow it." Delia turned to him in surprise. "That's very kind, but surely it's out of your way." "Not significantly," he said with a shrug. "And after yesterday's excitement, I'd feel better seeing you safely to your destination." She considered his offer, tempted by the prospect of his company for another day but conscious of not wanting to appear too eager or dependent. "I wouldn't want to delay your return to your responsibilities. Tom can manage without me for another day," Zachary assured her. "And to be honest, I'd welcome the chance to visit Colfax. There are supplies I need that Riverton's store doesn't carry." His explanation gave her the excuse she needed to accept. "Then I would appreciate the escort, thank you." They continued their walk, the conversation turning to lighter topics, books they'd read, memories of childhood, humorous stories of life on the frontier. Delia found herself laughing more than she had in months, perhaps years. There was something refreshing about Zachary's perspective on life, a blend of practical wisdom and unexpected optimism that drew her to him. By the time they returned to the smithy, Johnson was fitting the repaired wheel back onto her wagon. The cost was indeed reasonable, as Mrs. Miller had predicted, and Delia paid with relief that her limited funds would still see her comfortably to Colfax. "We can leave whenever you're ready," Zachary told her. "Though if you'd rather start fresh in the morning, I understand. It's already mid-afternoon." Delia considered the options. Starting now would mean traveling into the evening, but they could make good progress toward Colfax. "Let's get as far as we can today," she decided. "I'm eager to reach my uncle." Zachary nodded approvingly. "I thought you might say that. I've already settled my account at Mrs. Miller's and collected my horse." Within the hour, they were on the trail north, Zachary riding alongside as Delia handled the reins of her wagon. The repaired wheel performed perfectly, and the horses, well rested from their day in Riverton's livery stable, moved at a brisk pace. The afternoon passed pleasantly as they traveled, the landscape gradually changing from open grassland to rolling hills, dotted with oak trees and occasional stands of pine. The road, while not as well maintained as the eastern turnpikes Delia was accustomed to, was clear enough to allow good progress. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, Zachary guided them toward a small clearing beside a stream. "This is a good spot to make camp," he explained. "Fresh water, some shelter from those trees, and I've stopped here before without trouble." Delia agreed, though she felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of camping alone with a man she'd known for barely a day. As if sensing her thoughts, Zachary maintained a respectful distance as they set up camp, helping her unhitch the horses and gather firewood without ever making her feel uncomfortable. "I'll sleep under the wagon," he said matter-of-factly as he built a small fire. "You'll have privacy in your wagon." His consideration eased her concerns. As night fell, they shared a simple meal of beans and bacon that Zachary prepared with surprising skill, supplemented by biscuits Mrs. Miller had packed for their journey. Seated by the fire, wrapped in a shawl against the cooling evening air, Delia found herself studying Zachary's profile in the flickering light. There was something compelling about him, not just his handsome features, but the quiet strength he radiated, the kindness evident in his every action. "You're staring," he said softly, without looking at her. Heat rushed to Delia's cheeks. "I apologize. I was just thinking that I'm fortunate you were the one to find me yesterday." Now he turned to face her, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "I believe we make our own luck in this world, Delia Zimmer. But sometimes, just sometimes, fate lends a hand." The way he looked at her sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her hand or say something more, but instead, he stood and began banking the fire for the night. "We should get an early start tomorrow," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's about 6 hours to Colfax if the weather holds." Delia nodded, both disappointed and relieved by his restraint. Yes, that would be best. She retreated to her wagon soon after, arranging her bedding on the wooden floor among her possessions. Through the canvas cover, she could hear Zachary moving around the campsite, checking on the horses one final time before settling beneath the wagon. Sleep was slow in coming despite her physical tiredness. Her mind kept returning to the man just feet away from her, separated only by wooden planks and propriety. There was no denying she was attracted to him, but she reminded herself firmly that her priority must be establishing herself in Colfax, not developing feelings for a rancher she barely knew. Still, as she finally drifted off to sleep, Delia wondered if perhaps, once she was settled, there might be a chance to see Zachary Blackstone again. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the gentle nickering of horses. Delia woke feeling surprisingly refreshed, the ground beneath her wagon not nearly as uncomfortable as she'd feared. She dressed quickly in the confined space, smoothing her hair and pinning it neatly before climbing down. Zachary already had coffee brewing over a small fire, its rich aroma filling the clearing. He stood as she approached, offering her a tin cup of the steaming liquid. "You look rested," he observed, his own face showing no signs of discomfort from his night beneath the wagon. "I am, thank you," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Do we have time for breakfast? Already working on it." He gestured to a small pan where bacon was beginning to sizzle. "We'll be on our way within the hour." They ate quickly, packed up camp with efficient teamwork, and resumed their journey as the sun cleared the eastern hills. The day promised to be fair, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that kept the dust from the road to a minimum. As they traveled, Delia found herself increasingly aware of the approaching separation. By evening, she would be in Colfax, beginning her new life, while Zachary would return to his ranch. Despite having known him for such a short time, the thought of parting brought an unexpected pang of sadness. "Tell me about your uncle," Zachary said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. You mentioned you haven't seen him in some time. Not since I was a child, Delia confirmed. He's my father's brother, younger by several years. He came west during the gold rush of '49 but found his fortune in supplying miners rather than mining himself. Smart man, Zachary commented. Yes, from what I remember. He visited us in Pennsylvania when I was about 12. He was different from my father, more adventurous, less conventional. My father never approved of his decision to come west, thought it foolhardy. And yet here you are, following in your uncle's footsteps. Delia smiled at the observation. I suppose that's true, though necessity played a larger role than adventure in my case. Don't discount adventure entirely, Zachary said with a wink. It has its merits. They continued northward, the landscape becoming more mountainous as they approached the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. By midday, they stopped to rest the horses beside a clear mountain stream, sharing the last of Mrs. Miller's biscuits and some dried apple slices Delia had packed. We're making good time, Zachary observed, glancing at the sun's position. Should reach Colfax well before sundown. Delia nodded, trying to summon enthusiasm. That's good news. Zachary studied her face. You seem hesitant, having second thoughts about your uncle's offer. No, not at all, she assured him quickly. It's just, everything will be new, unknown. She paused, then admitted quietly, and I've enjoyed traveling with you. His expression softened. The feeling is mutual, Delia. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Then Zachary cleared his throat and stood, extending a hand to help her up. We should continue if we want to arrive at a decent hour. The remaining journey passed too quickly for Delia's liking. As the road wound through pine-covered hills, Zachary pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, the creek where gold had first been discovered in this region, the ridge where a famous stagecoach robbery had taken place, the valley where wild horses still roamed in small herds. By late afternoon, they crested a hill, and Colfax came into view below them, a proper town with several streets of buildings, the railroad tracks cutting through its center, wisps of smoke rising from chimneys and the steam engine parked at the station. There it is, Zachary said. Your new home. Delia took a deep breath, equal parts excitement and apprehension filling her chest. It looks larger than I expected. It's grown considerably since the Central Pacific came through, Zachary explained as they began the descent into town. Still small compared to Sacramento or San Francisco, but it has everything you need: bank, post office, several stores, a couple churches, even a small school. As they entered the outskirts of town, activity surrounded them: wagons and horsemen passing by, pedestrians on the wooden sidewalks, children playing in yards. After the solitude of the trail, the bustle was almost overwhelming. Mill Street is this way, Zachary directed, guiding them toward a side street lined with commercial buildings. That should be your uncle's store on the corner. Zimmer's general store was a substantial two-story building with large display windows and a freshly painted sign. As they pulled up outside, Delia felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. This was it, the destination she had traveled over 2,000 miles to reach. Before she could climb down from the wagon, the store's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall and lean, with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a shopkeeper's apron over a crisp white shirt, and his eyes widened as he spotted her. "Delia," he called, approaching the wagon. "Good Lord, it is you. I was beginning to worry when you didn't arrive yesterday." "Uncle Edwin," she greeted him, accepting his help down from the wagon. "I apologize for the delay. There was an incident on the trail." Edwin Zimmer's gaze shifted to Zachary, who had dismounted and was standing respectfully nearby. "And who might this be?" "Zachary Blackstone. Zachary introduced himself, extending his hand. "I had the good fortune to meet your niece when Hendrick's cattle decided to stampede across her path." Edwin's eyebrows shot up as he shook Zachary's hand. "A stampede! Good heavens, Delia! Mr. Blackstone saved my life," Delia explained. "The herd was heading straight for my wagon. He turned them at great personal risk, then helped me reach Riverton for repairs and escorted me the rest of the way." Edwin's expression changed from concern to gratitude. "Then, I owe you a tremendous debt, Mr. Blackstone. Please come inside, both of you. You must be exhausted from your journey." The interior of the store was well organized and abundantly stocked, with goods ranging from practical necessities to small luxuries. A young clerk was helping a customer at the counter, while a woman approximately Edwin's age was arranging a display of fabrics. "Martha," Edwin called to the woman, "come meet my niece Delia and her rescuer, Mr. Blackstone." The woman hurried over, her round face breaking into a warm smile. "Delia, we've been so looking forward to your arrival, and Mr. Blackstone, how wonderful to meet you. Martha is my wife of 2 years," Edwin explained to Delia. "I wrote to you about our marriage, but perhaps the letter didn't reach you before you departed." "It didn't," Delia confirmed, surprised but pleased by this development. Her uncle had been a bachelor when he'd visited Pennsylvania, and she had assumed he still was. "Well, now you'll have a woman's company as well as mine," Edwin said, clearly happy with the arrangement. "Martha, why don't you show Delia to her room while I speak with Mr. Blackstone?" Martha led Delia through a door at the back of the store and up a staircase to the living quarters above. The apartment was spacious and comfortable, with solid furniture and colorful rag rugs covering the wooden floors. "Your room is here," Martha said, opening a door to reveal a pleasant bedroom with a window overlooking the street. A clean bed with a patchwork quilt stood against one wall, a small dresser and washstand against another. "I hope you'll be comfortable." "It's lovely," Delia assured her, genuinely pleased with the arrangement. After months of travel and uncertainty, the prospect of a private room and a permanent home was deeply appealing. "I'll let you freshen up," Martha said kindly. "Come down when you're ready. I'll have some tea waiting, and I'm sure you'll want to say goodbye to your young man." "Oh, he's not," Delia began, but Martha had already slipped out of the room with a knowing smile. Delia quickly washed her face and hands, changed into her cleanest dress, and attempted to make herself presentable after the journey. By the time she returned downstairs, Zachary was engaged in what appeared to be a friendly conversation with her uncle, both men laughing at some shared joke. "Ah, there you are," Edwin said as she approached. "Mr. Blackstone has been telling me about your adventure. Quite the entrance you've made to California. One I hope not to repeat," Delia said with a smile, her eyes meeting Zachary's briefly. "I should be on my way," Zachary said, reaching for his hat. "I've imposed on your family's reunion long enough, and I have a few hours' ride ahead of me." "Nonsense," Edwin protested. "Stay for supper at least. It's the least we can do after what you've done for Delia." Zachary hesitated, glancing at Delia as if seeking her opinion. "Please stay," she said softly. "I'd like to thank you properly for everything." His resistance melted visibly. "In that case, I accept with pleasure." The store closed at 6 o'clock, and Martha prepared a delicious meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh vegetables from their small garden. The conversation flowed easily around the table, with Edwin sharing news of Colfax and asking questions about Delia's journey west. Throughout the meal, Delia was conscious of Zachary across the table, his presence both comforting and distracting. She caught him watching her several times, his expression thoughtful, almost wistful. After dinner, Edwin insisted on showing Delia and Zachary around town, proud of the community he had helped build. Despite the growing darkness, Colfax was still active, with lamplights glowing in windows and several businesses, notably the saloon, still open for evening trade. "The railroad has brought prosperity," Edwin explained as they walked along the main street. "We get travelers passing through daily, and the freight business keeps growing. It's a good time to be in Colfax." As they returned to the store, the inevitable moment of departure arrived. Edwin tactfully excused himself to help Martha with something inside, leaving Delia and Zachary alone on the porch. "Your uncle seems like a good man," Zachary said, his hat in his hands. "I think you'll be happy here." "I hope so," Delia replied. "I can't thank you enough for everything, Zach. Not just saving my life, but everything after." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "Will you be all right if I check on you in a week or so to see how you're settling in?" Delia's heart quickened at the prospect. "I'd like that very much." "Good," he said simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he reached for her hand, raising it to his lips for a brief, gentle kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Until then, Delia Zimmer. She watched him mount his horse and ride away, staying on the porch until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Only then did she turn to enter her new home, already counting the days until she might see him again. The following week passed in a blur of activity as Delia settled into life in Colfax. Edwin introduced her to the workings of the store, teaching her his system of inventory and accounting. She proved a quick study, her organized mind well suited to the tasks. Customers seemed to appreciate her polite efficiency, and Edwin was clearly pleased with her contribution. Martha, too, welcomed Delia's presence, particularly when she discovered Delia's skill with a needle. Soon, word spread through town that Zimmer's niece could alter dresses and create new ones, and women began approaching her with commissions. Edwin cleared a corner of the store for her to set up her sewing machine, and within days, she had several projects underway. Despite her busy schedule, Delia found her thoughts frequently drifting to Zachary. Each time the bell above the store door jingled, she looked up expectantly, only to be disappointed when it wasn't him. By the time a full week had passed since their parting, she was beginning to wonder if he had forgotten his promise to check on her. On the 9th day, as Delia was measuring fabric for Mrs. Peterson's new Sunday dress, the bell rang, and she glanced up automatically. Her heart leaped when she saw Zachary standing in the doorway, looking more handsome than she remembered in a clean shirt and vest, his hat in his hands. "Miss Zimmer," he greeted her formally, though his eyes held a warmth that was anything but formal. "I hope I find you well." "Very well, thank you, Mr. Blackstone," she replied, equally formal but unable to suppress her smile. "What brings you to Colfax today?" "Business primarily," he said, approaching her work area, "but I did promise to check on your settlement here." Edwin emerged from the storeroom, his face lighting up when he spotted their visitor. "Zachary, good to see you again. Come for those supplies we discussed, among other things," Zachary confirmed, shaking Edwin's hand. "Your niece appears to be thriving." "She's been a godsend," Edwin agreed enthusiastically. "Has a better head for figures than I do, and her sewing has brought in customers we've never had before." Delia felt herself blushing under their combined regard. "Uncle Edwin exaggerates." "I doubt that," Zachary said softly. Edwin looked between them, a knowing twinkle in his eye. "Well, I have inventory to attend to in the back. Delia, why don't you help Mr. Blackstone with his purchases? And perhaps you could take your midday break soon, show him that new cafe that opened last week." Before Delia could respond, Edwin had disappeared into the storeroom, leaving her alone with Zachary. Your uncle is not subtle, Zachary observed with amusement. No, he isn't, Delia agreed, setting aside her work. But his suggestion has merit. Are you hungry, starving? Zachary admitted. And eager for your company, if you're willing. The cafe was small but charming, with checkered tablecloths and vases of wildflowers on each table. Over bowls of hearty beef stew and fresh bread, they caught up on the events of the past week. The sewing business seems to be taking off, Zachary noted. I'm glad. It's early days yet, Delia cautioned. But yes, there appears to be demand for quality dressmaking here. And you, how is the ranch? Busy, he replied. We're preparing for winter, cutting hay, repairing fences, making sure the stock is healthy. Tom thinks we should expand the north pasture next spring. Their conversation flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for years rather than days. When they finally returned to the store, Delia felt a familiar reluctance to part. I need to deliver some cattle to a ranch near Auburn next week, Zachary said as they stood outside the store. I'll be passing through Colfax again. Perhaps dinner. I'd like that, Delia replied, her cheeks warming at his direct invitation. Good. He smiled, touching the brim of his hat. Until then. True to his word, Zachary returned the following week, taking Delia to dinner at the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Colfax. Over the next month, his visits became regular, occurring whenever his business brought him to town or nearby. Each time, they spent a few precious hours together, getting to know each other more deeply. Edwin and Martha observed this developing relationship with approving smiles, never interfering but making it clear they thought highly of Zachary. The townspeople, too, began to take notice of the handsome rancher's frequent visits to Zimmer's general store. As autumn progressed, Delia's dressmaking business continued to grow, keeping her busy with orders for winter clothing and holiday dresses. She had integrated seamlessly into life in Colfax, making friends among the local women and earning respect for her skills and work ethic. One crisp November afternoon, as golden leaves drifted past the store windows, the bell above the door announced Zachary's arrival. Delia looked up from the account books with a welcoming smile that faltered when she saw his serious expression. Zach, is something wrong? He approached the counter, removing his hat. No, nothing's wrong. But I need to speak with you about something important. Is there somewhere we could talk privately? Concerned by his manner, Delia nodded toward the back of the store. The storeroom is empty right now. Once inside the quiet room surrounded by shelves of merchandise, Zachary turned to face her. Delia, I've been offered an opportunity I need to consider carefully. Her heart sank. What kind of opportunity? A rancher near Sacramento is selling his property, 300 acres with good water rights and excellent grazing land. It would be a significant upgrade from Pine Ridge. That sounds wonderful, Delia said, though anxiety twisted in her stomach. Sacramento was much further away than his current ranch. Their regular visits would become impractical, if not impossible. It is a good opportunity, Zachary agreed, but it would mean moving away from this area, from you. The directness of his statement took her breath away. Oh. Zachary took a step closer. These past weeks, seeing you whenever I could, it's been the happiest time of my life. The thought of being further away from you, seeing you less often, I can't accept it. What are you saying, Zach? Delia asked softly, hope beginning to rise within her. He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his. I'm saying I love you, Delia Zimmer. I've loved you since the moment I saw you holding those reins with white knuckles, refusing to abandon your wagon even with a stampede bearing down on you. Tears pricked at Delia's eyes as joy surged through her. I love you too. Then marry me, he said simply. Come with me to the new ranch or stay here in Colfax and I'll turn down the offer. I don't care where we live as long as we're together." "Yes," Delia whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, I'll marry you, Zachary Blackstone." His face broke into a radiant smile as he pulled her close, capturing her lips in a kiss that expressed all the love and longing they had both been restraining for weeks. Delia melted into his embrace, her heart soaring with happiness. When they finally separated, both breathless, Zachary pressed his forehead to hers. "I should probably ask your uncle's blessing, though I suspect he already approves." Delia laughed softly. "He's been dropping hints for weeks. I think he and Martha have been planning our wedding since the day you brought me to Colfax." As expected, Edwin and Martha were overjoyed at the news, insisting on hosting an engagement dinner that very evening. The celebration was warm and joyful, with toasts to the couple's future happiness. The decision about the Sacramento ranch required careful consideration. After much discussion, Zachary and Delia agreed that the opportunity was too good to pass up. They would move after their wedding, though Delia would maintain connections with her Colfax customers, returning periodically to deliver special commissions. The wedding was set for January, allowing time for proper preparations and for Delia to complete her outstanding sewing orders. Edwin insisted on giving the bride away, while Martha threw herself into creating the perfect wedding dress, working secretly with Delia's measurements. As the wedding day approached, Delia found herself reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought her and Zachary together. If not for that terrifying stampede, if not for his courage and skill in turning the herd, they might never have met. What had seemed like potential tragedy had instead become the beginning of the greatest happiness she had ever known. The ceremony took place in Colfax's small church, decorated with evergreens and winter berries for the occasion. Despite the January chill, the building was filled with warmth as friends and neighbors gathered to witness the union. Zachary, standing at the altar in a new black suit, watched with undisguised adoration as Delia walked toward him on Edwin's arm, radiant in the ivory satin gown Martha had created. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity exchanged with clear voices and unwavering certainty. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary's kiss held both tenderness and passion, a reflection of the love that had grown between them in the months since their dramatic first meeting. The reception at the town hall was a lively affair, with music, dancing, and plenty of food contributed by the women of Colfax. As the evening progressed, Delia found a moment of quiet with her new husband, stepping outside to gaze at the stars shining brilliantly in the winter sky. "Happy, Mrs. Blackstone?" Zachary asked, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his warmth. "Though I still can't quite believe how our story began. A stampede of all things." Zachary chuckled, pulling her closer. "I've always been grateful to those cattle. Scared the daylights out of me when I saw them heading for your wagon, but they brought you into my life." "My hero," Delia teased gently, turning in his arms to face him, risking life and limb to save a damsel in distress. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," he said seriously, cupping her cheek in his hand. "For you, I'd face 1,000 stampedes." Their new life together began the following day as they departed for the ranch near Sacramento. The property exceeded Delia's expectations, a sprawling landscape of rolling hills and meadows, with a creek winding through its heart and distant mountains, forming a magnificent backdrop. The main house, while in need of some repairs and updates, was substantially larger than Zachary's cabin at Pine Ridge, with enough rooms for a family to grow. Spring brought new beginnings as they settled into ranch life together. Delia established a sewing room in the house, continuing her dressmaking business on a smaller scale while learning the basics of ranch management. Zachary expanded the cattle operation, adding horses as he'd always wanted, and hired additional hands to manage the larger property. Their partnership proved as effective in business as it was in love. Delia's organizational skills and head for figures complemented Zachary's practical knowledge and leadership abilities. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, gaining a reputation for quality stock and fair dealings. In the summer of their first year of marriage, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Delia shared the news they had both been hoping for. She was expecting their first child. Zachary's joy knew no bounds. He lifted her from her chair, spinning her around gently before setting her down with the utmost care. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Their son, William Edwin Blackstone, was born the following winter, a healthy, robust boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's auburn hair. As Delia cradled him in her arms, Zachary beside her with wonder and pride shining in his face, she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. Over the years, their family grew. A daughter, Grace Martha, joined them 2 years later, followed by another son, Thomas James. The ranch expanded as well, with additional land purchases, improved facilities, and an ever-growing reputation that brought customers from as far away as San Francisco. Delia never lost her connection to Colfax. Several times a year, the family would travel there to visit Edwin and Martha, bringing the children to know their great-uncle and aunt. These visits were joyous occasions, with the Zimmer's store becoming a second home for the young Blackstones. On one such visit, as they celebrated William's 10th birthday, Edwin raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, his eyes twinkling as they moved from Delia to Zachary to the children gathered around the table. "And to Stampedes, without which none of us would be here together today." Laughter filled the room as glasses clinked. Under the table, Zachary reached for Delia's hand, squeezing it gently. The simple gesture conveyed what words could not: gratitude for the life they had built together, the love that had grown from that chance encounter on a dusty trail, the family that was their greatest joy and achievement. Later that night, after the children were asleep in the rooms Edwin kept ready for their visits, Delia and Zachary stood on the porch of the store, looking up at the same stars that had witnessed their wedding night embrace years before. "Any regrets?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist, a familiar, comfortable position that still sent warmth through her after all these years. Delia shook her head, leaning against his solid presence. "Not one. You. Only that I didn't spot your wagon sooner," he replied with a smile. "Could have saved us both some heart-stopping moments." "I don't know," Delia mused. "I think we needed that drama to bring us together. Some love stories begin with a quiet meeting of eyes across a room. Ours needed something more, substantial, like 1,000 pounds of beef on the hoof." Zachary suggested dryly. "Exactly," Delia laughed, turning to face him. At 40, Zachary was more handsome than ever, a few strands of silver at his temples, lines of experience around his eyes, but the same strength and kindness in his face that had captured her heart all those years ago. "I love you, Delia Blackstone," he said softly, the words as heartfelt now as they had been when first spoken in Edwin's storeroom. "Every day with you is a blessing I never take for granted." "And I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "My cowboy hero, who turned a herd and saved my life in more ways than one." As they held each other under the canopy of stars, Delia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a terrifying stampede to a lifetime of love, family, and partnership. Life had not always been easy on the frontier. They had faced droughts and harsh winters, financial challenges and personal losses. But through it all, they had faced each trial together, their bond only strengthening with time. What had begun with danger and rescue had grown into something beautiful, and enduring, a love story written against the backdrop of the Wild West. A tale of courage and chance, of two lives intertwined by fate and choice. And as Zachary led her back inside to their waiting family, Delia knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single moment of their remarkable journey. 25 years after that fateful day when the stampede nearly claimed her life, Delia stood on the wide porch of the Blackstone ranch house, watching her husband work with a young colt in the corral. At 50, Zachary moved with the same confident grace that had caught her attention that first day, though his dark hair was now liberally streaked with silver, and the lines around his eyes had deepened with years of squinting into the sun. Their ranch had prospered beyond their early expectations. The main house had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, and several outbuildings had been added: a bunkhouse for the hands, a proper barn, stables for the horses they now bred specifically for sale to wealthy buyers across California. The sound of a piano drifted through the open windows, their daughter Grace practicing for the upcoming harvest dance. At 23, she was the image of her mother at that age, with the same auburn hair and determined spirit. She had recently become engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher, a match that delighted both families. Inside, William, now 25 and increasingly taking responsibility for the ranch's operations, would be poring over the account books with the same meticulous attention his mother had once given to Edwin's store ledgers. Their youngest, Thomas, 19 and full of ambition, was away at university in San Francisco, the first Blackstone to pursue higher education, determined to bring new scientific approaches to ranching upon his return. Life had been good to them, Delia reflected. There had been challenges. Of course, the devastating drought of '82 that nearly broke them, the fire that destroyed the original barn, the terrible influenza that had swept through the region, taking friends and neighbors. Through it all, she and Zachary had faced each trial together, their partnership never faltering. Edwin and Martha had both passed on 3 years earlier, within months of each other, leaving the store to Delia. She had sold it to a promising young couple from Sacramento, though she maintained ownership of the building itself. The rental income provided a scholarship fund for Colfax children who wished to continue their education, a legacy that would have pleased her uncle enormously. Zachary looked up, catching her gaze across the yard. He raised a hand in greeting, his smile as warm and genuine as it had been the day they wed. Delia returned the gesture, her heart still quickening at the connection between them that had never diminished with time. Later that evening, after supper had been cleared away and Grace had retired to her room to write to her fiancé, William approached his parents as they sat by the fire in the comfortable parlor. "I've been thinking," he began, his expression serious, "about expanding our breeding program. There's increasing demand for quality horses in San Francisco, and our stock has a good reputation." Zachary nodded thoughtfully. "I've had the same thought. What do you propose?" William outlined his plan, purchasing 2 new stallions with different bloodlines, expanding the mare pasture, building a separate facility specifically for breeding and training. It was ambitious but well-reasoned, showing the careful consideration he had given the idea. "What do you think, Mother?" William asked when he'd finished. Though Zachary had long been the public face of Blackstone Ranch, everyone in the family knew that Delia's business acumen played an equal role in their success. The initial investment is significant, she observed, but the potential returns justify it. I think it's an excellent plan, Will. The pride in Zachary's eyes as he looked at their son was unmistakable. We'll start making arrangements next week, he decided. This will be your project to lead. William's face lit up with excitement and determination. You won't regret it, I promise. After he had gone to bed, Zachary moved to sit beside Delia on the settee, draping his arm around her shoulders in a familiar, comfortable gesture. Our boy has a good head on his shoulders. He takes after his father, Delia replied, leaning into his warmth. His mother, more like, Zachary countered with a smile. Your practicality balanced with my willingness to take risks, it's a good combination in our children. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the flames dance in the hearth. These quiet moments together were precious to them, both a time to reflect on the day, to simply enjoy each other's presence without the need for words. I had a letter from Thomas today, Delia said eventually. He's excelling in his studies as usual. His professor has suggested he might consider teaching after graduation. Teaching? Zachary raised an eyebrow. I thought he was set on returning to the ranch. He can do both, Delia pointed out. The agricultural college is expanding its programs. He could teach part of the year and apply what he learns here the rest of the time. Zachary considered this. You're right. No reason he can't pursue both paths if that's what he wants. Their children's futures had always been a source of thoughtful discussion between them. Unlike many parents of their generation, they had encouraged their offspring to follow their individual interests and talents, whether that meant continuing the family business or striking out in new directions. And Grace? Zachary asked. Is she still determined on a June wedding? More than ever, Delia confirmed. Mrs. Harrison and I have been corresponding about the arrangements. It will be a beautiful celebration. Hard to believe our little girl will be a married woman, Zachary mused. Seems like yesterday she was riding on my shoulders around the corral. Time passes so quickly, Delia agreed, a touch of wistfulness in her voice. Before we know it, there will be grandchildren running around this house. The thought brought smiles to both their faces. Family had always been at the center of their lives, and the prospect of a new generation to love and guide was deeply appealing. As the fire burned low, Zachary rose to add another log, then held out his hand to Delia. Come outside with me for a moment. It's a clear night. Curious, she took his hand and followed him onto the porch. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, brilliant against the velvety blackness, the Milky Way a gleaming ribbon across the heavens. The air was crisp but not uncomfortably cold, carrying the sense of pine and the distant scent of wildflowers that bloomed even in autumn. Remember our wedding night in Colfax? Zachary asked, drawing her close. When we looked at the stars like this? Of course, Delia replied softly. You asked if I was happy. And now I'm asking again, he said, turning to face her. After all these years, all we've been through together, are you happy, Delia? She looked up at him, this man who had saved her life and then filled it with love and purpose. Despite the silver in his hair and the lines on his face, she still saw the courageous cowboy who had ridden fearlessly into the path of a stampede, the gentle man who had respected her independence, even as he won her heart. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, she answered truthfully. You've given me everything I could want: love, family, partnership, a life of meaning and joy. Zachary's arms tightened around her. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Delia Blackstone. From the moment I saw you on that trail, something in me knew you were the one I'd been waiting for without even realizing I was waiting. Delia stretched up to kiss him, marveling that even after 25 years, his touch could still send warmth spreading through her body. "I thank God every day for that stampede," she whispered against his lips, "for bringing you to me when I needed you most." They stood together under the vast canopy of stars, two people who had found in each other not just love, but genuine partnership, mutual respect, and abiding friendship. The young woman frightened for her life, and the brave cowboy who had saved her, had grown together into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have imagined that dusty afternoon on the California trail. As they returned to their home, hand in hand, Delia reflected on the unpredictable nature of life's journey. The stampede that had nearly ended her life had instead been the beginning of her greatest happiness. What had seemed like potential tragedy had been transformed, through courage and chance and choice, into a lifetime of love and prosperity, and she wouldn't have changed a single moment of it. The years continued to pass at Blackstone Ranch, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. Grace's June wedding was everything they had hoped for, a joyful celebration under blooming apple trees, with family and friends gathered to witness her union with young James Harrison. William took increasing responsibility for the ranch operations, implementing his breeding program with notable success. Thomas completed his studies with honors and divided his time between teaching at the agricultural college and applying his knowledge to improve the ranch's productivity. 5 years after Grace's wedding, the first grandchild arrived, a robust boy with the Blackstone green eyes, whom Grace and James named Edwin after Delia's beloved uncle. Over the following decade, the family continued to grow, with William marrying a spirited young woman from San Francisco and producing 3 children of his own, and Thomas eventually settling down with the daughter of a university colleague, adding twin girls to the expanding Blackstone clan. By the time Delia and Zachary celebrated their 40th anniversary, their once modest ranch had become one of the most prosperous in Northern California, known for its superior cattle and exceptional horses. The main house had become the heart of a thriving community, with Sunday dinners regularly hosting 20 or more family members and close friends. At 64, Delia remained active in ranch affairs, though she had gradually passed most of her responsibilities to her children and their spouses. Her sewing room, now primarily used for creating special garments for grandchildren and quilts for new babies, remained her personal sanctuary. Zachary, at 66, still rode out with the hands most days, though he no longer participated in the more physically demanding tasks of ranching. Their partnership, forged in that dramatic moment when a stampede threatened to end Delia's journey before it truly began, had only deepened with the passing years. They remained each other's closest confidant, most trusted advisor, and dearest friend. The love between them had matured like fine wine, developing richness and complexity with time while losing none of its essential character. On a golden afternoon in the autumn of their 41st year together, Delia and Zachary sat on the wide front porch of their home, rocking gently as they watched 3 of their grandchildren playing with a new puppy on the lawn. Grace's Edwin, now a lanky 15-year-old with his grandfather's height and his mother's musical talent, was showing his younger cousins how to teach the excitable pup to sit and stay. "He has your patience," Delia observed, nodding toward their eldest grandchild, "and your way with animals." "He has your kindness," Zachary countered with a smile. "Did you see how he helped little Margaret when she fell yesterday? Didn't make a fuss, just quietly got her back on her feet." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a wagon coming up the long drive to the house. William emerged from the barn to greet the visitors, a middle-aged couple they didn't immediately recognize. As the wagon drew closer, William turned toward the porch with an expression of surprise. "Father," he called, "I think you might want to meet these folks." Curious, Zachary rose from his rocker and descended the porch steps, Delia following close behind. The couple had stopped their wagon and were climbing down, the man tall and weathered with a shock of white hair, the woman petite and neat in a blue traveling dress. "Mr. Blackstone?" the man asked as they approached. "Zachary Blackstone. That's me," Zachary confirmed, studying the stranger with interest. The man extended his hand. "Robert Hendricks, this is my wife, Sarah. I believe you might have had an encounter with my father's cattle some 40 years ago." Understanding dawned on Zachary's face as he shook Robert's hand. "Hendricks' cattle, the Stampede. Yes, indeed, that was quite a day." "It was my father's herd," Robert explained. "I was just a boy then, but I remember the uproar when the hands came back reporting how some crazy cowboy had turned the lead steers to save a woman in a wagon." He glanced at Delia with a respectful nod. "I assume this is the lady in question." "My wife, Delia," Zachary confirmed, placing his hand at the small of her back. "The finest woman I've ever known." Delia extended her hand to the visitors. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Hendricks. What brings you to our ranch after all these years?" "We're selling our property down south," Sarah Hendricks explained. "Moving to Oregon to be near our daughter and her family. But before we left California for good, Robert wanted to meet the man from that old story, the cowboy who risked his life to turn our stampeding cattle." William, who had been listening with increasing interest, looked between his father and the visitors. "I've heard this story all my life, but I never knew the name of the cattle owner." "Come inside," Delia invited warmly. "We were about to have some refreshments. You must join us and tell us what brings you this way." As they settled in the comfortable parlor with tea and freshly baked gingerbread, Robert Hendricks explained that he had heard about Blackstone Ranch from a horse buyer in Sacramento. The name had triggered his memory of the Stampede incident, and when he learned the location matched, he had decided to make this detour on their journey north. "My father always said he owed you a debt for preventing what could have been a terrible tragedy," Robert told Zachary. "He sent men to look for you afterward, but no one could figure out who you were or where you'd gone." "We headed to Riverton right after," Zachary explained. "Delia's wagon needed repairs. By the time we continued to Colfax, the incident was behind us." "Not entirely behind you, I'd say," Sarah observed with a smile, glancing between them. "It seems that Stampede led to something quite wonderful." "It did indeed," Delia agreed, reaching for Zachary's hand. "Though I wouldn't recommend it as a typical way to meet one's future husband." Laughter filled the room, warming the already comfortable space. The Hendricks stayed for dinner, meeting the extended family as they gathered for the evening meal. Stories were shared around the long table, tales of ranching life, of the early days in California, of the changes they had all witnessed over the decades. As the evening drew to a close, Robert Hendricks raised his glass in a toast. "To brave men and fortunate encounters," he said, nodding to Zachary. "And to the remarkable lives that grow from unexpected moments." After their guests had departed with promises to write from Oregon, the family lingered around the table, still captivated by the day's unexpected connection to the past. "I've heard the Stampede story 100 times," William's wife Catherine said, "but meeting someone connected to it makes it seem more real somehow." "Oh, it was real enough," Delia assured her with feeling. "I can still hear the thunder of those hooves, still feel the ground shaking beneath my wagon." "Were you terrified, grandmother?" asked 12-year-old Margaret, her eyes wide. "Absolutely terrified," Delia admitted. "I was certain I was going to die right there on that trail." "But then grandfather appeared," Edwin prompted. Familiar with the story but eager to hear it again, Zachary chuckled, shaking his head. I didn't appear like some mythical hero despite what the family stories might suggest. I was nearly as scared as your grandmother trying to turn those lead steers. But you did it, Thomas pointed out. You saved Mother's life and gave us all a wonderful story to tell, Grace added. The stampede that started it all. Later that night, as Delia and Zachary prepared for bed in the master bedroom they had shared for 4 decades, she found herself reflecting on the day's unexpected visitors and the memories they had stirred. Strange to think of all the lives that were shaped by that moment, she mused, brushing out her hair still thick but now completely silver. Not just ours, but our children's, our grandchildren's. None of them would exist if not for your courage that day. Zachary came to stand behind her, their eyes meeting in the mirror. His hands rested gently on her shoulders as they had countless times over the years. Or if not for your resilience in making that journey west alone, we both played our parts, Del. She covered one of his hands with her own, comforted by the familiar weight and warmth. Do you ever wonder about the chances of it all? What if I had left Riverton an hour earlier or later? What if you had taken a different route that day? Sometimes, he admitted. But then, I remember something my mother used to say, that the important things in life have a way of finding us, no matter what paths we take. Delia turned to face him, studying the beloved features that time had altered but never diminished in her eyes. Well, I'm certainly glad you found me, Zachary Blackstone, even if it took a stampede to make it happen. His arms encircled her, drawing her close as they had thousands of times before. Best day of my life, he murmured against her hair. Every day with you has been a gift, Delia. Every single one. As they stood together in the quiet of their room, surrounded by the evidence of their long and fruitful life together, photographs of children and grandchildren, keepsakes collected over decades, the quilt Delia had made for their 30th anniversary spread across their bed, both reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter on a dusty California trail to the creation of a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful day when a stampede threatened to end everything before it began. Instead, it had been just the beginning, the dramatic opening chapter of a love story that had filled page after page with moments of joy and sorrow, challenge and triumph, all bound together by the unbreakable thread of their devotion to each other. And as they settled into bed, Zachary's arm curving protectively around Delia as it had every night for 40 years, both knew with absolute certainty that if they had to do it all again, face every hardship, weather every storm, confront every obstacle, they would choose the same path, the same partner, the same remarkable life they had built together. Because some love stories, especially those that begin with stampedes and courage and chance, are destined to endure not just for a lifetime, but in the hearts and memories of generations to come.